RPG a day. Question number lucky 13. How has your play evolved? How has my play evolved? The evolution of my play. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to say that I came into the scene as awesome as I am now. But I've always been both a devout power gamer and role player. A few years ago, I decided, yeah, I'm a totally immersed power gamer because it was funny, because I was both a power gamer and a role player, and there's always this sort of contention. Well, you can't be one if you're the other, right? Which is a bunch of BS, because I'm both. But how has my play evolved? I mean, the biggest change is now I've actually gotten worse online. Like, I don't want to say worse, but the limitations of gaming online have prevented me from playing the way I love to. Like, I like to get up and perform and physically move and turn to people as, like, if I'm addressing your character, I turn to you and I address you as your character. This is why I love to put on voices, you know. Hey, oi, we're going to stop that, you know, like, I love doing that. I love playing with minis, you know, and terrain, and I've always played with minis and terrain. When I debuted on the scene, right, back in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, when I first played my first game of AD&D, I had already been playing Warhammer Fantasy for a while. I've had friends that were playing Warhammer Fantasy for a while. And that's how I got introduced to the GM, because he was a Warhammer Fantasy player. So he already had terrain. He already had minis. So back in the sort of early to mid 90s, I started right off the bat, minis and terrain. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Was I a power gamer? I did not know the rules that well, but I was helped through the rules, and I picked, you know, everything that would make my concept the strongest that it could be, which at the time was a scion and a monk. Half-orc. First character. I forget his name, but I remember that much about him back when Psionis had like these little cards for the powers. Anyway, bleh, whatever. And in the no, that was not my first character. My first character was a pre-gen, I believe. And it was more of a, I showed up, I didn't know what to expect, was given a pre-gen and asked to play. I was described the situation, and the situation was essentially we had two major bounties in this town. One was that people were getting sick from this, you know, by this mysterious disease that nobody could really identify, nobody knew the origin of, and people were dropping dead, they were dying. And then outside of the city, they had a Skaven problem, which is rat men. But, you know, Warhammer Fantasy, Skaven was an army. We had the minis, so that was the problem. And within like 5 minutes of showing up on the table, I solved the unsolvable issue that everyone else that had been playing for weeks couldn't solve. And it was that the problem with the disease and the ratmen were related, because, you know, you kill a ratman, you take its head, you bring back the head, you get your gold. But then they throw the heads in this sort of mass grave. And I was like, well, maybe the blood and the gore come from the head, the rotting is seeping into the groundwater. Where does your well system come from? And that's exactly what was happening. And that's, you know, game one, day one. And I've been that way all along. I love following mysteries and picking up clues. And I adore continuity in a game. Right? I grew up elementary school. I was always acting in plays. I was always landing like the lead role in my elementary school plays. I loved acting. I loved performing. I loved performing in front of an audience. So by the time I got into tabletop gaming, I was already performing. You know, I was already doing voices, already getting up and just, yes, draw my sword, and, you know, taking the pen, like, you know, grabbing it tightly, right? Maybe I wasn't so eloquent with the words I used to describe what I was doing, but I would act out what I was doing because these were in-person games. And then I guess maybe that's how I evolved. I learned to utilize verbal description as much as physical acting. But I guess that was more of a necessity as I GM'd with more and more terrain, and I would have to describe situations and really not leave empty space while I'm setting up terrain, and pushed even more so on in online gaming where there is no terrain. Like you can't get I can't get up off a camera. Like I'm gonna get up. What am I doing? Who am I talking to? You don't know. You just see a shirt, right? You gotta sit put and describe as best you can what you're doing, right? Like that's it. So I guess that's how I evolved. Maybe I'm just a dinosaur gonna go extinct.